This episode of Ratified is brought to you by Decathlon. With equipment for over 70 sports, check them out online on decathlon.ie or better yet, visit one of their stores in Dublin or Limerick. Practice any sport you love. We've got all the gear to keep you going. Are you ready to play?
Hello and welcome to Ratified with myself, Bubbles O'Dwyer, Marc Ó Sé, Richie Hogan and Paddy Andrews. Today's episode is sponsored by Decathlon. We're going to talk about the greatest managers we played under. And I'll come to you, Marc. You've played under a few. Have you a particular one that stands out?
Played under a good few, obviously. Started off with Paddy, Jack O'Connor, Eamon Fitzmaurice, Jack again. Club manager Marc Ó Sé, who was absolutely incredible. No relation, Paddy, by the way.
O'Shea as well.
Yeah. No relation, but Marc Ó Sé was incredible. He was an RTE broadcaster. He used to commentate in the All-Ireland finals at Gaelge. Do you remember the minor commentator? Yeah, and he was our club man. He won All-Irelands in 69 and 70. Just an incredible man. And like, if there was ever two characters that could get a dressing room going, it was Marc Ó Sé and my uncle Paddy, and they were great pals as well. As I say, he wasn't related, but then moved on with Kerry and got in with the seniors, and Paddy was just like, Kerry had won an All-Ireland since 86.
11 years.
So like 11 years, it was huge. It'd be a bit like the Dublin's 83 to 95, you know, it was massive.
95 to 11, 16 years.
Yeah. And like, you know, so that was a famine in Kerry, and Paddy came in, and Paddy was like very lucky that because he went for the job. He went for the job, I would say, when Mick O'Dwyer retired, didn't get it. He went for the job when Mickey Ned retired, he didn't get it. Ogie got it, Ogie Moran. So then he took charge of the Kerry under-21s. They won 2 All-Irelands, 95, 96, and he got the job in October 96. And then like, just, you had those young players, brother Dara, Darrow Kineda, Liam Hassett, William Kirby, Johnny Crowley, and then you put those with the likes of Maurice Fitzgerald, Liam Flaherty, Eamon Breen. You just had an incredible team, and they won the All-Ireland and won it again in 2000. I just wanted to be part of this, and eventually got in 2001. But yeah, he was just like, he was the first, I suppose, of our era that brought in the video analysis. You know, he'd have the 2 video cassettes at home, and he'd be taping one after the other. Like, and like, you know, the amount, like, he'd be working, and but that's
Hugh Kerry, man.
That's how it was done at the time. And like, he'd have Morris Reid, God be good to him, who worked at RTE. He'd have Morris sending the videos down on the train. Paddy'd collect them off the train, and he would video analyse, finish working in the pub maybe 12:30, 1 o'clock, go up into the house for 3 hours maybe, and do that video analysis, which at the time was unheard of, you know, back in the 90s, you know. So he kind of started that off. But like, I was very lucky. Every manager I played under, they all had their values. They were all excellent managers in their own ways. And I took something from every single man.
And were they all different?
They were all totally different. All totally different. I mean, when
Would any of them, Mark, managed and coached? Because that seems to be a more modern thing, where there's certain managers who just manage and they leave the on-pitch stuff to the coaches, or was there any of those guys who had done a dual role, managing?
Kind of dual role, I would say. I would say dual role. I'd imagine, and I'd love to hear what you're going to say about Cody, but with Dempsey and Cody, I'd imagine it was dual. But the way we worked it with John O'Keefe, he was with Paddy, he was coaching us, and then when it came to playing football, Paddy'd be reffing in the middle of the field, rarely blow the whistle, and just leave us at it, like, and he'd always finish on a positive. There would never be, like, when training was finishing, there would never be a situation where the ball would go wide and Paddy blow the whistle and we'd all tag off. Like, it would have to be something positive that you'd finish on, and he'd be delighted. And of course, we were going home with him in the car, you know, and if training went well, we'd be home in 45 minutes. If training went poorly, it was the longest journey home. You'd be in the car for around an hour and 10 minutes. He was driving slowly, trying to analyse what went wrong in that training session.
Would he ever say anything to you?
Oh, he would, yeah.
On the journey home?
Yeah. I remember I was in college in Dublin, in Maynooth and Trinity. I don't know where it was. And coming down, say, when you're down for the summer, Sigerson, Sigerson was March at the time, February, March. So April, May, your kicking, your skill set wouldn't be where it needed to be. I remember when I got back after college, back training with Kerry, and there was one night I was inside and my kicking was a bit off, and by God would he let you know. He'd like call you out in front of the rest of the players, and it was tough. Like, and he was probably tougher on us than he was on the rest, simply because didn't want to be labelled with nepotism or anything like that. So, but yeah, it was incredible, and I suppose didn't get to play under him for too long. That's the only thing, 3 years. But yeah, he left a huge impression on me for sure. Yeah, what, like, I'd imagine Cody, like you're talking about, and don't get me wrong, like Mick O'Dwyer for me, like, was just incredible. And I before I get to Cody, Mick O'Dwyer for me and Paddy stand at a different level, simply because with Mick O'Dwyer, they say, sure, he had great players. Sure, he had to win in All-Ireland, he had great players. Mick O'Dwyer goes up to Kildare, he wins Leinster Championships when it's been Dublin meet, defies the odds, wins Leinster Championships. Then he goes to Laois, wins Leinster Championships with Laois. Then he goes to Wicklow, brings Wicklow playing to a level that they've never reached in their lives. So Mick O'Dwyer, to me, will go down as the all-time great manager, simply because what he achieved in the game. But
outside of Kerry.
Yeah,
what he achieved
both
with Kerry,
both in Kerry, because what like, and I would have spoken to the likes of Paddy, you know, in times gone by, Mikey Sheedy, they all would have told like me the stories where Kerry were at, and then where Dublin brought it to Hefo, where he brought the Dublin team to, and what Mick O needed to do to surpass the Dubs. And I don't think there was any love lost between Hefo and Mick O. And I don't think there were any great pals or anything, but just the training, the like, I mean, Paddy, you were down in Kerry a couple of months ago, and the stories about the 21 nights of training, is consecutive nights that Kerry were doing, and Mick O just brought it to a new level. But when I'm looking at greatest managers, to me, obviously Jim Gavin is there, Cody is there, and Mick O'Dwyer is there. But obviously you played under Cody.
I would think that Brian would have been far more similar to Paddy Ó Sé than he would have been to Jim Gavin. Yeah. And I think that's probably in terms of, and I'm kind of judging Jim in terms of the way he speaks, but also, let's say, the detail that he talks about in terms of the FRC. You know, and in terms of analysis, in terms of organisation, we had none of that. You know, we had virtually no video analysis up until a couple of years ago. We saw Clare going. Clare wore GPS trackers in 2016 against us in a league game, league semi-final, and they hammered us. And like we would have, not that we would have turned our nose up at all that, but we almost saw everything outside of the basics as almost permission to have an excuse, or you know, that's the way it was viewed, because we were winning everything. Like I mentioned around closing training sessions, because you clearly don't want the other team knowing what your tactics are. Like, we didn't pay any respect to that. The same with naming a dummy team. No, never had any time for that. Or
Richie, was that set by Cody, or was that the individual players themselves? Did he create that environment?
He would have created. Yeah, no. To be fair, he would have been on top of it. That was the environment.
It's his way.
You know, that was the environment. Yeah, we had no coach. So not that he didn't do any coaching. We had no coach at all, and oftentimes we floated. But his line was always, if you're an inter-county hurler and you need to be coached, you're not good enough to be here. that was the way he would address it, you know. Now it has changed since, right?
What stage was that, Richie? Like what year are you talking? When did that
Sure,
stop?
you could be talking the first designated coach that came in during my time was in 2021.
What would you do before that? Like, what would training consist of?
So we
Who
had
took the training sessions.
No, that it didn't mean that. So there would be no coaching in training sessions. There would be drills. So you go through your drills and you get into a game. We did not bring hurls to training until April. We had no lights in Kilkenny. We trained in Kilkenny College and Kieran's College, where they had kind of these bad floodlights, and we would run and run and run. Sorry, when I say no hurls. We'd bring hurls on a Sunday morning. So we'd hurl a match on a Sunday morning if we didn't have a league game or if we didn't have whatever. And then on the other nights, we wouldn't even bring the hurls. It'd be running. And it would be...
And that was under Mick Dempsey?
So under Mick... Now, Mick was the S&C coach, then he was a selector, then he went back to S&C without being a selector because I think you mentioned that double job and piece didn't suit him. And Mick was outstanding, but like Mick comes from a football background, so there would never be any tactics. There would never be anything like that. It was always, tackling, touch, strike, the basic skills of the game that you would do against a wall ball, And it was all very, 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 very basic. And then out onto the pitch, man v man, you go up against the other guy, see who wins, and then we pick a team on the Sunday based on what we see there. And that was the model, Like
was that different? Were other teams, was that universal across hurling, or was this unique to Kilkenny?
I'd say
and
just
Cody,
before your time, that would have been very...
just before my time,
similar.
but like traditionally that was Kilkenny. Kilkenny is, we pick our 15 players who go out, and no matter what 15 players go out, if I beat my man, and if 13, 14 other lads do that, we're going to win the game. Yeah. And it's only kind of when I would say Marc Ó Sé kind of came in with Liam Sheedy. Now, Cork always had a bit of innovation, and you could see in 2004 and 5 and that, they always had a bit of innovation. But the only team that never probably changed and followed that was probably Kilkenny. Yeah. And it eventually, Cork won, 3 in a row, was it 2, 3?
2.
And then
2.
And then it came back to Kilkenny again. And then it was only kind of when Tip came on in 2008 that it started kind of changing a small bit again. And then the break from Kilkenny, I know 2012, then 13, came back to Kilkenny in 14, and then there was a couple of different teams and stuff like that. It's only kind of then where it kind of started to change, and maybe Kilkenny started to change maybe around 14, 15, 16
for us it changed very slowly. It's still changing. They still don't play the game the way Limerick play it, for example.
They try though.
They try it, but we wouldn't. The problem is we're trying to change that now. Whereas Limerick are 7 years down the road.
Yeah.
Cork, 5 years down the road.
But
it's different.
With Cody, and I go back to Mick O'Dwyer, had the players. With Jim Gavin, had the players, right? And when you have the players, it's like you just do your job.
Yeah, exactly.
As Roy Keane always says, you go out, you do what you have to do. And Kilkenny had the raw materials to do that. And then you can kind of apply Brian Cody's methods in that situation. But then when you start to regress and not have the same quality as you once had. Yeah. Then you possibly...
So that's it. You think of, we won 8 All-Irelands in 10 years, and we were beaten in in another one of those as well. I think I got to 25 or 26 first year. I'd never been in an All-Ireland, So we had something that worked. Now, as long as and this is a key thing about leadership and the different styles of leadership, you can have whatever style of leadership you want, it has to be effective. The job is to win. And in Kilkenny, the job is to win the All-Ireland. And it was completely effective. And I do think he was excellent. And he was, because you mentioned about in terms of getting a dressing room going, Brian was unbelievable in a dressing room. Yeah. And he was also, unbelievable at setting the tone and the temperature in the dressing room fine, but also at ensuring that nobody ever gets carried away with themselves. He was very good at that. So we all stayed incredibly level. And we would have looked at the Dublin team before you became what you were. Remember the Dublin team of the mid 2000s, the 2003s, 4s, 5s. We thought they were the England footballers. That was the type of the showmanship, the crack that goes on around it, and that's what we would have been completely against that. And from a Cork perspective, the more they came out with their little gadgets and their and their contact lenses in their eyes, and one day they came out where everyone was wearing the same colour helmets, so the other opposition would be confused. The more we saw that, the more we loved the change in the hurling ball. We were like, these lads think that they can focus on the 1%, but they're forgetting about the 90%. Yeah. And when we saw, I remember a huge motivating factor for us in 2013, Clare won the All-Ireland, did brilliant to win it. But then they brought out this documentary at the end of that year, where it showed there was this video of Tony Kelly running through some woods on Christmas Day at like 2:00 in the morning, and Davy Fitz was behind him with the lights.
After a night out, training.
Training, right? And this was their thing. We're training on Christmas Day and nobody else is doing it. We would have seen that and thought, are these lads some idiots? That they think that just because you train on Christmas Day, that you're going to win in All Ireland, because that would motivate us even more. Like, we wouldn't go near, like, we know when downtime is, and we know when we start to train, we do it properly from start to finish. We were never into the gimmicks. You know, we would have seen that as a gimmick. There's no need to train on Christmas Day. You get nothing out of it. You know, that
Same
sort of
as training
thing.
any other day.
So, like, yeah, that's the way, that would have been our view. You know, that would have been the environment that we grew up in.
You played your whole career on the Richie. Did he adapt, or did he make any changes maybe towards the end? It's such a long time to be there.
Yeah, he brought different guys in.
Consistent the whole
we
way?
changed a little bit towards the end. Now, I played under Derek Ling for one season. And
Paddy has shown his hurling knowledge there.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, I only played 12 minutes under him, I think. Derek, who trained underneath Brian as a player and as a selector, brought an awful lot different to it. It was an incredible player. He was an incredible leader. So he had a huge amount of credibility coming in, and also because it was new and it was fresh, he could bring in all of these things and he could take ownership over them. You know, it was so he did things kind of very differently in terms of tactics and all the rest of it. I think once you're in the environment, it can be difficult to change. You know, and we developed a little bit in terms of our use of the ball, but like, you know,
the fundamentals are still,
probably just a little bit too slow.
When you were, like, say, you look at Alex Ferguson left Brian Robson do what he did. He left Roy Keane do what he did. He left Roy Keane, let out a few roars. You look at the Kilkenny team. You had leaders, JJ, Tommy Walsh. Every line you looked on, you had leaders. Like, was it very much just let the boys at it?
Yeah. Like, I remember, you spoke, Bubbles, around that period from 2011. So 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, that 5-year bracket, we won 4 of 5. We won 2, lost, and then another 2. I actually can't remember Brian even in the dressing room. Like, you know, he very often, he wouldn't even, at half time, he wouldn't say anything. He'd just stay. Or before the game, it would all kick off before he'd get in, and then he'd just let it off. Yeah. You know, like, very rarely did he need to come in and start wearing hers off the table. Sometimes he did, of course he did, and sometimes when he felt that things needed to be said, fine. And I would say the more when we started losing a little bit more, confidence was down a little bit. Then he was far more vocal and trying to get things going. But once it was humming.
But his genius is creating that environment to build that. Like, every team doesn't operate like that. Every team can't operate like that.
Yeah, but like that famous game against Galway where he has his moment with Henry after the game and the shaking of the hand and all of that. Obviously, whatever was going on with himself and Henry was going on. But that's also kind of a message to his own team too, I think. Like, you know, we're going to go after. We're really going to go after this as the year goes on. If you get me, kind of like, you know, like, I know Henry's gone off to Galway and all of that and done his thing. But I think with Cody, there was always kind of like the Kilkenny way. And like that there was our way of doing it. And maybe he was he didn't like spreading the gospel. I just got that feeling that
possibly. I wasn't even, classic my story, I was watching that game on the TV because I was injured. But
made great TV though.
Yeah, it made great TV. Yeah, he's outrageously animated on the line, and has always been. But rarely would he piss off the other manager to such an extent. Like, he'd never be up in someone's face, or he'd never be shouting something at the other management.
He's animated in a different way.
He's not antagonistic.
He's animated at his own,
exactly
at his own players. And let's say if a score goes over, he'd never be given a big fist pump. I'd say he'd never celebrate a score.
Well, he'd celebrate at
the end of the game.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. He's just keeping guys going. And strangely enough, we don't hear anything. You know, like, you don't hear anything. But like, that's his character. But look, when you're winning, the narrative surrounds the whole thing from the other side, and then people kind of play up to it, and something appears. So, all great when you're winning and you're successful. Everyone's great, aren't they? But he really was. I thought he was the ideal man. You have to be of your time, and I think he was the ideal man of his time. That's why I think he's different to, let's say, he couldn't be more different to the likes of a Jim McGuinness. But does that make Jim McGuinness?
There's different ways to
exactly. There's completely different approach to a game, to how they see the game, to how they structure training sessions or whatever. Just completely different.
Like the respect that he has from outside of Kilkenny. I played in a couple of All Irelands, and they're all against Kilkenny. And after every All Ireland, I don't know now if the Tipperary manager went down to Kilkenny dressing room like that, but Brian Cody came up to our dressing room, win or lose. And the respect that he has. I remember sitting inside in the dressing room, and Paddy Maher, we were after winning or whatever, and Paddy Maher was sitting there, and Brian Cody walks in, and everyone shuts up and stands up and just listen to him talking and clapped him out of the dressing room. Just even coming from Tipperary point of view, where biggest rivals for 10, 12 years, whatever, the respect that he commands, he was a brilliant manager.
What about yourself, Bubbles?
I played under a few, but not that the only one to stand out, but Liam Sheedy, when he came in, we had good managers. My first man, I was kind of involved with Liam in 2010. I was kind of on the extended panel, and then I concentrated on under 21 for a couple of years, and then Eamon O'Shea came in 2013. Now Eamon O'Shea, an unbelievable coach, probably the best coach that I've trained under. Manager wise, probably wasn't suited, I suppose. It's a different kind of a role. And then we had Mick Ryan. Mick Ryan brought us to an All Ireland title, and then Liam came back then, and Liam was unbelievable. Just from the get go, your first meeting with him, it's just the way that he sets out his stall and what he expects of you and his standards. And I suppose the sign of a good manager is the people that he brings in around him. It's Liam, kind of similar to what we've said. Liam very rarely stepped onto the field and took a training session. He might take one drill maybe once a month, but he was able to see that he needs the best coach, the best S&C, and to put a team together around him was probably the main thing. What in his second stint probably made him successful, and to bring us from where we were in 2018 to 2019 wasn't solely because of Liam Sheedy. It was because of the team that he built around him. And 2
buses to bring him to matches.
That was happening before Liam Sheedy came on board. But
bus for the backroom staff.
But doesn't that show managers can get in their way, their own way sometimes, and that ego that I have to be over everything, I have to have my fingerprints and everything. It shows a real, I think, confidence in their own ability and belief in what they do. That I'm trusting my 3 or 4 or 5 or 20, whoever it is.
He put his trust in all of them, but everything was put back on the players. Everything was player driven, and he was the overseer. He made sure that everything was going okay, and if something wasn't going okay for me and Richie needed something different or whatever it was, he'd try and make sure that everything was done to get the best performance out of you on a Tuesday and a Friday night train, and then when it comes to a Sunday, and he was absolutely unbelievable. And just the way he treats everyone individually. When it's a collective, then he treats everyone as a collective, but individually, there's a famous clip of us playing Limerick. I think there's a Clare on the sideline. Remember, we had these 15-minute breaks for water and stuff like that. Yeah. He came over and hit me a tap on the shoulder, and he went over and hit Shamey a dig into the chest. So there's a difference of way to manage people.
You were one who needed a hug, were you?
Well, I was playing well. I was playing well. Shamey was going bad. So it was more so, you're going all right. You keep it going. Shamey, come on you're playing bad, But
to be fair to him, some achievement to win an All Ireland, head away for a few years, come back and do it now. And I think he did it in his first year when he came back. You think of all of the great managers in other sports, the thing that's always said,
never go back.
Never go back. Never go back and try and do it again. You look at the guy over in Wales, Warren Gatland, going back into Wales ends in disaster. Same in other places. Yeah. And also Jack O'Connor, for him to do that three times.
3 goals. 3 times, yeah.
That, but to put yourself forward to do that takes a huge amount of courage, because you've made your legacy is there. Like him winning that in 2010 was huge. Tip hadn't won an All-Ireland in years, and
For a traditional county.
exactly, yeah, and in such a ruthless county, because I'd say I would even exclude Cork from this, but just in Kilkenny and Tipperary, the fans are so demanding.
Oh yeah.
You know, so demanding of the manager.
But you look at, say, we're looking at all the counties here. We're looking at Kilkenny, Dublin, Tipperary, Kerry. You look at Tipperary. You're growing up. You're watching, maybe before your time, Nicky English. Do you know? Then you talk about Owen Kelly. Then you're coming along, Shamie Callanan. You know. Then you're looking at yourself, DJ Carey. Then you've got Henry Shefflin, TJ Reid. You know, Dublin. There's always been a player that has gone through, you know, the Vinnie Murphys, the Desi Farrells. Then all of a sudden, in the newer brigade, the Bernard Brogans. Then Con comes along. We never thought we were going to replace a Mikey Sheehy. Gooch all of a sudden, Morris Fitz comes along. Then all of a sudden Gooch comes along. Then all of a sudden David Clifford comes along. I think the beauty about counties so successful as the counties that we mentioned is that conveyor belt of talent is always there, and that's why we go to these minor games. That's why we go to these. Who's the next teenage sensation that's going to?
The previous generations help inspire.
Correct.
Those guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, no doubt. David Clifford's looking, going, watching the Gooch, and the Gooch is watching Morris Fitz.
Yeah,
Morris
correct.
Fitz
Yeah.
is watching Mikey Sheehy and stuff. So that's the role. That's what success can do. Not every county has that level of success, but that's such an important part of it. Young players looking up and saying, it becomes real for them. I can do that, or I want to do that. But if you have a template or a figurehead there going, it means so much. I think when we were all kids and you go watching Croke Park, watching your club or watching your county, and you win, and it's like, that becomes the dream. That's how real it becomes, you know. So it is so important, that legacy. The players themselves probably don't think about it. Dave Clifford's not thinking, I can't wait to inspire a fella 10 years' time when I'm retired, but that's what he's doing, you know, and it's so important.
Yeah, just going back to Sheedy, and Richie, you probably won't agree with this, but if Liam Sheedy hadn't left in 2010, held on for another couple of years, Tip would have won a couple more All-Irelands. He's obviously not going to agree.
I wouldn't
with
agree with it.
Like the rivalry with Kilkenny was still there, and then there was a rivalry building with Galway. But from where he left that team in 2010 for a new manager to come in,
You guys won 11,
there was a drop off.
We won 11, 12, 14 and 15.
Like,
they had plenty of chances now, to be fair.
I only lost one.
13. Cork and Clare.
But like I do think if Sheedy hadn't left that, like them games between Tip and Kilkenny were unbelievable.
It was a massive rivalry, yeah.
Until 2012 they were all close. Like 2009 could have went that either way. 10, 11, 12 was obviously a write-off. But if Liam Sheedy was there in 2012, what happened that day wouldn't have happened. You know? Like, but if Liam Sheedy, he left because of work, whatever, he came back. You know, I think Tip would have won a couple more All-Irelands if he was the manager in that period.
Serious manager. What about yourself, Paddy? Obviously, Jim is.
Yeah, I'd say, as all of
Pat had done obviously great work before.
played under loads of different coaches and different managers. I would say between Pat and Jim, you mentioned it, Richie, that period in the 90s, Dublin had a really tough period. You know, I say Mick would come in and won with Laois. Paddy had come in and won the Leinster Championship, Westmeath, Kildare under McGeaney, and these. Dublin were miles away from winning All-Ireland. I made my debut under Pillar, actually. It was incredible for me. I was 18 years of age, making my debut for the senior team, and Dublin had won a couple of Leinster Championships, but the reality was, and Mark, you'll know, Dublin were not going to win All-Ireland. And looking back, I would say, and I think we all would have agreed, all that off the field stuff was not helping Dublin perform. But that was kind of the atmosphere at the time. That was just the culture. And Pat came in. Pat was a really young manager. He was playing. Vincent's won the All-Ireland club title in 2008 on Patrick's Day. Pat was playing. And 6 months later, he was the Dublin senior football manager.
Is Pat more of a hurling background than football?
No, he's more of a football, but he managed some hurling as well. Like.
I know he coached hurling, but
Vincent's are very strong dual club.
Oh, I know that, but I thought he came from hurling.
No, he was football. Like, he played with Dublin. He won All-Ireland in '95, but he won with the club in 2008. And like 6 months later, he was the Dublin manager. He was a really young guy to kind of step in. And I think he'll admit this himself. His first season was 2009. We got an absolute hiding off Kerry out there. And I think Pat maybe compromised a little bit. He kind of just kept the show on the road of what the previous regime and stuff. And again, we won the Leinster Championship with Kildare in a great Leinster final. and we went into that Kerry game and thought the usual, way ahead of ourselves, thought we were better than what we were, loads of distractions, just things you don't think of at the time, but looking back you cringe, and we lost by 17 points. So that was where Dublin were at. And I'd say
Kerry had a great start in that game, though.
Kerry's going to go for the throw up, basically. Yeah, but a serious team with the right mindset and the right focus can deal with those setbacks.
Yeah, correct.
That happens.
Yeah.
That's what you're playing the top teams. You're not going to have 70 minutes where it's sunshine and roses. But we completely collapsed. So, Pat,
The only thing I'll say about that, Paddy, you were still a very young team. You had some senior players, but you were...
Wheelo, we Jason Sherlock, Clucko, Alan
Clucko
Brogan.
was young.
Clucko still played. He's nearly 10 years under his belt at that stage as well. Look, you could make maybe cases for it. The reality was we were miles away from winning an All-Ireland. And the hardest thing I would say to do in any kind of management or leadership is to change the atmosphere, change the culture and grow a brand new... That was basically like ground zero. And Pat was a young guy, no experience in sports management, but he went away after that night and changed the Dublin senior football team. Everything about how we approached things, how we trained, all the off-the-field stuff, the players who maybe enjoyed that aspect of things were left under no uncertain terms. A very Cody-esque approach. You're here to win the All-Ireland, and anything that distracts you from that is gone. That ain't going to fly anymore, because for a decade or so that was just the way it was, and it wasn't enough. So I think Pat, to change that, we got to the All-Ireland semi-final. The following year we lost to Cork. We scored a penalty in the last minute. Cork won the All-Ireland, and the following year we won the All-Ireland. So we turned it around that quick, and there's a couple of games that stand out in Dublin GAA. One is that 09 semi-final when we lost to Kerry, because the culture had to change, and the one with Jim and 14 against Donegal was more around those tactics and how we played the game. But there are two seminal games, and I think Pat's job in changing the culture and atmosphere and being really ruthless, and I was on the end of it, but it had to happen. I think that's genius in terms of leadership and creating that culture, because everyone talks about, Richie, we're in this game
with zero experience.
I
didn't know that.
But he had.
He was a class act, though, Pat.
Unbelievable. He's an unbelievably intelligent guy.
The way he held himself, yeah.
But you talk about that engagement with players, that care, that emotional intelligence, the sharpness, the awareness he had. I think he set the groundwork. Won the All-Ireland in 2011. It was incredible. So that takes massive leadership, and I couldn't have more respect for someone to do that. And then Jim came in November 12, and we'd go on and have the success we had. Very different style of management with Jim, but he was the perfect coach to take over what Pat had created. I'm not saying Jim couldn't have done what Pat done, but Pat's role, Dublin was in a very different place, and he changed that. So that was an incredible achievement and what it did for Dublin GA. And then Jim just built on that and had amazing success. I don't think Pat could have done what Jim did.
Yeah, or vice versa.
Or vice versa, but both of them were incredible leaders, and the influence they had on me and all the players were eternally grateful, because they created the environment for us to achieve our dreams, what we did. But
would Jim have been the way Liam Sheedy delegated, the way John Kiley is now delegating with...
Yeah, I see a lot of similarities with Kinnerk
is
and Kiley,
was that what Jim did?
Yeah, Jim was attention to detail, which we've seen, and that's become more prevalent, and people are more aware of it. Obviously, the FRC stuff he's doing. We had brilliant players, and we had what you spoke about, Mark, Paddy's win in '97, where with an underage crop of guys coming through, Kilkenny, one under 21 team was Kilkenny, Fenton, McCaffrey, Con, Mannion, John Smott, Costello. They were all in one age group, so they were coming in to supplement Cluxton, Bernard Brogan, Dermot Connolly. So we had the nucleus. The guys had 1 and 11, which was a real weight off the shoulders. But to integrate the newer guys to come in and create that team, Jim was made for that. The attention to detail, the creating an environment where everyone was encouraged to be themselves, everyone had their voice, the team was empowered, and the responsibility was passed to coaches like Declan Darcy, Jason Sherlock, Mick Bahan, Brian Cullen, some brilliant coaches, but they were given room to breathe as well. And that's what I'd say. You talk about Sheedy. Jim's genius as a leader was to create an environment where he had no ego. And there was no, people say they have no ego, and it's a load of bollocks, really. Jim was absolutely true to his word. He gave the power to everyone and trusted them to do it, and that helped everyone on that team. And he created that, and that was his genius. And the other thing as well, we didn't lose a match for 6 years, like. You know, so that consistency, that's National League, all our championship games, that consistency, he was relentless. Every single day, every single match. It was tiring thinking about it, but that, he would not allow for the foot to come off the gas. And just that mentality, we spoke about in a previous episode, that hunger to keep going and keep going and keep going. And he said that, and he didn't ask anyone else to do it that he's not doing. And he did that for 7 years as Dublin manager. And that passed to the players. That was the environment that was created. And different style from Pat, but genius nonetheless. And
that's
we're very
some
fortunate.
record, like, considered 6
Unbelievable.
years. Because, like, after you win in All Ireland, like, you have your pre-season in April, wasn't it?
We'd win the National League still.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
So, like, he'd win the National League without doing a so-called full pre-season. And then after the National League, because Leinster at the time isn't competitive,
Yeah.
you do your pre-season then, like, you know, like, that's
But
some
also,
record.
it's a bit we were talking about what you guys had with Kilkenny and Cody. You had 30 players who could do that. You know, so players would change, and he never lost players. It was like he didn't get a game or anything, but it was always, he kept the group was really tight, the atmosphere, you were playing for each other as a team, so even if you weren't playing, there was no sulking or anything like that. But he had the ability to say, we play a National League game, and he'd make 7 or 8 changes, but key to our success, 7 or 8 guys coming in were as good, if not better than the
The
other
only
guys.
one you'd see that probably he didn't get 100% out of would be Diarmuid Connolly.
I don't know about that.
Was he the player like that, say, the way Eric Anthony used to show up
Yeah.
to games, we're not wearing the blazer? Was Connolly the one player that there was maybe perhaps an exception made for with certain
Yeah.
situations?
Yeah, I think Jim got a lot out of Dermot.
No, I'm not saying that he didn't, but, like, just Diarmuid was unbelievable. Like, probably one of the best footballers ever played the game. It's
Talent-wise, yeah, he was exceptional, you know, and Dermot was brilliant for us. You know, was a key part of all the success we had. But this was, again, comes back to Jim's management style. He understood that maybe certain players need different types of management. That's why you need to be adaptable, you need to be flexible, and whatever Dermot needed, Jim was willing to do that. And I think the players understood that. There was an environment there where we all cared about each other, so if someone was under the pump around something, or just, it was like, yeah, I can see why Jim's doing that. And I think, to be fair to Dermot, he repaid us so many times in big games. But again, certain managers can go in and, like I say, ego can get in the way, and it's like, this is the only way I'm doing this, and if you don't fall into that. Whereas he understood for the group, we need this guy, we have a duty of care to look after all of our players, and I thought he was brilliant with Dermot, and we understood that as players.
Yeah.
And there's so many examples of, not just for Dermot, loads of players at different times, you know, exams, work, personal life, whatever it might be, given the space to do that. But no more so than you spoke about with Cody, Richie. Jim created, he created an environment where the team, everyone involved in it, felt complete ownership of it and gave everyone a voice. And that takes a hard thing to do, it's a hard thing to keep doing it for 7 years, but he was incredible at that. And I learned more from Jim, maybe not on the football side. I played 3 years under 21 with him as well. Like, he was amazing for my career, gave me chances, numerous chances. But you learn a lot around just management and leadership from someone like Jim. So
Yeah, I remember when Liam came in, like, he would have used a lot of stuff that Dublin would have used. Like, he would have went to Jim Gavin, he would have went to a lot of people involved in the Dublin setup. I remember Noel McGrath going to Johnny Cooper.
yeah,
I remember, like, us, like, and Tipperary as our group saying that, like, we want to try and become the hurling of Dublin, the hurling equivalent to Dublin, like, and we tried to base a lot of the stuff that we did
were like that with the lads.
upon that.
That's sport though, isn't it? Like,
Yeah,
you look,
yeah,
teams
100%,
look,
yeah.
you emulate what's successful, what works, and you try and steal from them. You know, that was it. So we would have looked at more so at what you guys had done, Richie. We would have looked at what Kerry did, how they played.
Like,
all
we'd
those
have them
things.
all down at our training sessions. We had Leo Cullen training sessions.
Yeah,
regularly.
Leinster rugby would have been
You know,
crossover
down,
there.
wanted to watch a training camp, that sort of stuff. I don't know, did
But
they pick up much? Because you can't, like, for us it was just about the culture and the environment. I don't know, can you pick that up?
No, you have
if they
to grow
grow
that.
Like,
You
we'd
have to
laugh,
grow that.
Yeah, we'd laugh sometimes at at
Leo Cullen was in with us as well.
was yeah.
He was looking around.
What about Leo Cullen? We had Johan van Graan. He's South African.
we laugh at maybe other counties, especially the counties in the north, because they're so far away from traditional hurling counties that they'll come down, they'll bring a team bus down, and they'll maybe play a couple of games. Then they'll want to go to a Kilkenny training session, and they'll be taking notes. And we just had images of maybe poor guys up in Antrim and Tyrone and all these places up north, and what are they doing? Just pucking the ball over and back 1v1 like all day long, because that's all we were doing, you know. Like we'd regularly go out there, and you know, lads would be laughing and joking about warm-ups.
People still don't believe our training with Dublin at the time under Jim was fund up skills pay the bills.
Yeah. We were in Carton House the same.
Yeah,
same
it was the most, people from the outside looking in go, these guys must be up to something crazy. Yeah. What are they doing? And it was fundamental. Every single training session, we'd do hand passing drills to each other, 10 yards, just routine, making the skills, and it got us out of so many holes that it was robotic at the time. But
that's why the game is all hand passing. So I wouldn't. That's all you're doing.
But the focus was on skills. People go, you have to do more than that.
But you had the skills. Like you look at.
But because we trained at passing. Because we trained for it.
Yeah.
Every single day.
But you look at we spoke about Kieran Kilkenny, one of the previous episodes. Like Kieran Kilkenny for me was one of the best fist passers of the ball in the game. Like he could pick out a pass 15, 20
you're
yards.
running through and goal, and it's a shit hand pass, or it's 2
there
yards
you go.
behind.
And if the ball doesn't go into your chest,
chance is gone.
It's game over.
We won a lot of finals, a lot of games by a point, by 2 points, by 3 points.
But now your kickers,
good hand skills.
Your kickers were extraordinary though.
Because we kicked
like
every
right and left.
When you weren't blocking up the training pitch beforehand with pucking the ball around the clears, we were there an hour before training.
But it's like just like everyone's talking about like environments, like Leo Cullen going down to Kilkenny and stuff like that. We had Johan van Graan like from South Africa. Like what did he know about hurling? Like, but it's all about managers trying to create an environment like which can help you perform at the high level. Like, and that's the one thing that seems to be in common with all the managers. Like,
I think the big thing you said, Mark, one of the things you have to admire is one, the consistency, but the longevity to keep doing it. And the ability to, like say, for Mick and Jim gets that argument as well, we need great players and all that stuff, for Mick to go and do it and have the hunger and the passion. Because lads, we've all been in dressing rooms and players can be awful bastards. Like, coach comes in and if he doesn't hit the ground running the first time, the players look and say, this fella's a spoofer. Like. But for guys to come in and keep doing it year on year and keep adding value to different groups, to different teams is incredible. See Cody's back coaching club teams and stuff like the mentality to do that, to reach the peak and been there and been fired at and have the success and the heartache and still want to do it.
The only thing I think with Jim Gavin that separates him is the record. Loses one game, never loses again. You know, like that.
But that loss,
you know,
how he responded to that and how we all did, we wouldn't have won what we did without.
That's what I mean.
Defeat,
like it's just the ability. How many teams? For example, are great teams, then they're beaten and they fall off. You know, like it's just that's, you know, the dam is burst then and they're gone and they're fading. Where it's just the ability to come back and never lose again. You know, completely change the thing around and never lose and then leave or stay or whatever. And look, but I think that's maybe what separates them. You know, one game is and look, Leinster Championship. It wasn't anywhere near what Leinster Championships have previously been, but all of the teams that lined up after that to a probably undercooked Dublin team got obliterated. You know, like.
But the key thing, it was like, and people used to roll their eyes. We used to people sticking to the process and things like that, and people go, "Would they ever piss off?" Like, that was legitimate. We would play a Leinster Championship game against Carlow with the same preparation, genuinely. And people go, "What are you talking about? You're going to win that match by 100 points." And we were going to. But the approach to that, because he knew if I drop my guard here, or if I let players take the piss here, we'll win this match by 50 points. But that can come back when we're playing Mayo, or we're playing Tyrone, or we're playing Kerry, or Donegal, whoever it was. The consistency and dedication every single time, that it bred into the players. We could not, and it stood to us in those bigger games. And that, He was relentless, and he was 100% genuine about that, and we got the rewards for it.